Ardacon is the biggest Middle-earth strategy battle game tournament in the world, and in this video we're going to break down the winning lists from Ardacon. My name's Jacob Lucas and this is Conquest Creations. Now Ardacon has several different wargaming tournaments. It's a whole festival basically of Middle-earth strategy battle game. In this video we're going to be looking at the winners from the doubles, the winners from the Invitational Masters tournament, as well as the top 10 lists from the World Championship. Now, as we are breaking down some army lists, it's easy to think that if you just copy the army lists of the winning players, that you should do well at a tournament. In Middle-earth strategy battle game, that is absolutely not the case. This is very much a game of skill. So we should think of these army lists as simply a tool that a good player uses to win, rather than something that makes a player win. All right, let's start by looking at the doubles list. Now, there were 57 teams in the doubles, and they have 700-point lists, with 350 points to each player. In third place, we have Dark Meal and Shaka, who played the Pits of Dol Guldur Legendary Legion. This is about how you'd expect to see the Pits Legendary Legion put together. It's got Azog on the White Warg, the Keeper of the Dungeons, and the Hunter Orc Captain, all with a variety of warriors in their warband, split between Gundabad Orcs and Hunter Orcs. This build actually is much lighter on the Hunter Orc side than the Gundabad side. Typically, I really like the Hunter Orcs. They've got 2 attacks and strength 4, so they hit very hard, but with only a defense of 4, they die pretty quickly. Now, I understand the idea of having a Hunter Orc in front and a Spearman behind them, but then it's silly because the only guys who can take spears have defense 6, so why do you have your high defense guys in the back? And I think that's probably what these guys were thinking when they decided to take a minimal amount of Hunter Orcs. It comes in with 39 models, which for 700 points is pretty decent, especially when you've got Azog running around with a free heroic combat and 6 points of might. They've only got 1 bow in their whole army, which is not very much. I'd definitely be taking more than that, but this obviously worked for them. Let's jump into second place in the doubles. That was a list that I would not expect to see at the top of a massive tournament. It is Ugluk Scouts, played by Le Pochon and Fleur Le Preux. I'm terrible at pronouncing that. I presume that is something French. Now, Ugluk Scouts just by itself, I don't think is the strongest army out there. It doesn't really have a big hitter. You don't really have that many spears. And there's this weird interplay of the Uruk-hai being really fast while the Orcs being slow, but they get bonuses if they fight together. But these guys managed to do it. They did come in with 50 models. We've got Mao-Her and Grishnak and an Uruk-hai Scout Captain played by one of them. And then the other one is playing Ugluk, Snaga, and another Uruk-hai Scout Captain. The way that the warband sizes worked out was a little bit awkward because they had that Uruk-hai Scout Captain who had an empty warband. I probably would have split it up so that we had 6 relatively equal sized warbands instead of 2 that were empty and 4 that were full. I love that they included Snaga here, definitely a thematic choice. He's just an Orc Captain with 3 might and a special rule that basically doesn't do anything, but you take him for that 3 might. I'm really impressed that these guys managed to come out on top against 57 other teams coming in second place. Let's look at the winners of the doubles. This is played by Phil and Fidi, and they've got the host of the Dragon Emperor. Now, we all know the host of the Dragon Emperor is very good. 2022 doubles was also won by the host of the Dragon Emperor. So we've got Rutabi and Brogia played by one of the players, and importantly, in that warband with Rutabi is the Easterling Cataphract with War Drum. This makes the whole army move much faster. And then the other player, unsurprisingly, has the Dragon Emperor himself. This comes in at 35 models at 700 points. That's not too bad when you've got some really big heroes like the Dragon Emperor and Rutabi. Typically, if you can see about 1 model per 20 points, you're kind of on average, so I'd say that this is exactly average. But it has significantly above average troops, with Fight 5 men with pikes, so it's pretty strong. It's no surprise to see this high up in a tournament. I'm sure lots and lots of people have seen this a lot in competitive play. And when the FAQ came out at the start of August, a lot of people were expecting to see the Dragon Emperor get nerfed. Personally, I don't think he's that powerful, or at least not powerful enough to get nerfed, and neither did the rules writers. So first place goes to host of the Dragon Emperor. If you like the content that we're creating here and you want a way to help out, you should check out our web store where we have STLs of all this awesome terrain that we've designed. I worked on sculpting the Kingdom of Saxonia myself, and we also have the Kingdom of Dirac Deep. Currently in the works, we have a new secret project that's on its way that might be out by the end of the year, depending on how quick we are. All right, the next one we're going to look at is the International Invitational Masters tournament. To get into this tournament, you need to win one of the system opens from around the world. Each country that has a big SBG scene has a big tournament where the winner gets invited to this tournament. Here in Australia, it's the Clash of the Titans tournament. And in third place for the International Masters is Jay Clare. Jay Clare is the rules writer of the Middle-earth strategy battle game, and I think that there is no better person to be in charge of the rules than one of the best players in the world. He came third this time and he won the World Championship last year, that is, so we know he's pretty good. Now this is the same list that he was playing in that World Championship, and this is Galadriel and Celeborn with a variety of Galadrim warriors. He has 2 guards of Galadrim Court in the army, which are Fight 6 pikemen. That Fight 6 is so important. He's just got 1 Wood Elf Sentinel and some Wood Elf Archers in there as well. Coming in with 33 models at 650 points, it's not too bad, especially given that you've got Fight 5 and 6 in there. Galadriel is such a good caster. At only 125 points, she can immobilize and compel and provide you with blinding light, so she's great at shutting down heroes that are generally a lot more valuable than she is. Jay Clare is an absolute expert player, so it's no surprise to see his name up here. This list on its own I don't think is very impressive. If someone told me I had to play against it, I think I'd feel pretty confident. So it just goes to show how the skill of the player matters the most. In second place is Assault on Lothlorien, played by Lig94. Now, just a couple weeks before the tournament, Assault on Lothlorien did get a slight nerf from the August FAQ. It used to be that you could take as many goblins or as many orcs as you'd like, but now you have to have at least 50% orcs, which is really good because the goblins are the ones that are a lot stronger. Now, Assault on Lothlorien gives you bonuses for having a horde, and it makes the whole board covered in darkness. This means that all shooting is reduced to a 12-inch range, but receives +1 to wound. The only caveat to that is that the Goblin Archers, because they have the Cave Dweller special rule, are not affected by that 12-inch range, so they can still shoot at full range. It also gives you bonuses for casting spells with your wizards, and if you outnumber an opponent in a fight, you get +1 to wound. That was a lot of things, I know, it has a lot. And it's no surprise to see it up at the top here. A lot of people have been saying that it is the best Legendary Legion for a little while now, and look, second place is kind of proving that. Now this army comes in with 53 models, which is quite a lot, especially at 650 points. We've got Merzger, Druzhag, a Goblin Shaman, and an Orc Captain. Now, importantly, there's no Ashrak. There's 3 wizards you're allowed to take, Druzhag, Merzger, and Ashrak. Ashrak boosts up spiders, and he's not present in this list. Instead, we've gone for just more models. In this Assault on Lothlorien, there's really not many monsters. We've just got 2 giant spiders and 1 bat swarm. I think that could be a bit of a missed opportunity because you're getting better casting with Druzhag. He can really make those monsters so terrifying, but instead Lig chose to go for the higher numbers. Let's look at the first place list, and that is, hey, once again, Assault on Lothlorien, this time played by the girl from Down Under. That's right, Australia's very own Kylie. This is the second time she's winning this Invitational Masters tournament, and the UK is a long way away from Australia, so it's awesome commitment that she's travelled all the way there. Now this is of course the same Legendary Legion that came second place, but this list is quite different. Firstly, she's gone with actually the same hero breakdown. Merzger, Druzhag, Goblin Shaman, and an Orc Captain. Her Orc Captain's on a Warg and is leading some Warg riders, so there's some mobility there that Lig94 was maybe lacking a little bit of. She's got 2 Bat Swarms instead of just 1, and 4 Giant Spiders. This hits her numbers down to 42, so 53 models compared to 42 is a very big difference. But this one is really utilizing the strengths of the Legion a little bit more in my opinion. With those 4 giant spiders, that gives Druzhag 4 targets that he's able to enrage, as well as the bat swarms, but you're probably trying to do it with those giant spiders. And it's not just that the giant spiders need to be enraged, because the giant spiders are also just really, really good on their own. Now, both of them had the Goblin Shaman, which is a choice that I'm not sure I fully agree with. It is hard to disagree with an army list that won a massive tournament like this, but the Goblin Shaman, in my mind, doesn't provide as much as Ashrak would have. He can do a Immobilize or a Transfix, as well as cast Fury, but the Fury is only going to affect the Goblins instead of the Orcs, Goblins, and Monsters, so it doesn't seem like it gets full value. Obviously it worked, so maybe don't take my criticism too seriously. So congratulations to Kylie for winning the International Masters for the second time. Now let's get into the World Championship. This is the meat and potatoes of Ardacon. This is the main tournament. We're going to look at the top 10 army lists. In the World Championship, there was 171 players. So let's get straight into it. In 10th place, we have LOTR Fan playing Angmar. Now his 650 point army has the Witch King on horse with the Morgul crown, a Barrow-wight, and Gulliver. Now this is actually very similar to the Angmar army that Kylie did win the International Masters Invitational from a few years ago. This is the way we see Angmar built a lot. It's always the Witch King and Gulliver, and then the third hero is always contentious. It's either an Orc Captain for 2 points of might, or it's the Barrow-wight for the extra paralyze. LOTR Fan went with the Barrow-wight, which gives him a lot more magical utility, but it means he's a lot lower on his might resources. He's just got 3 on the Witch King and 3 on Gulliver, and you don't really want to be spending those for heroic moves, so I'm sure he had some tough choices to make when it came to his might usage. He has 3 Deadmarch Spectres in the army, which are one of the core components of Angmar. These guys are similar to a Wood Elf Sentinel, where they make an enemy model take a courage test. If that model fails the courage test, then LOTR Fan gets to move it wherever he wants within its movement. This is really valuable for using Gulliver to get into the right position to assassinate some opponents. When you use this in conjunction with a Compel from the Witch King, you can really do a lot of damage and open up some gaps that your opponent didn't realize were in their lines. He had 32 models, which at 650 is about the normal amount, as I said before, about 1 model per 20 points, so 32 is right on that, which is great when you've got Gulliver and the Witch King, 2 very expensive heroes. Let's go into 9th place, which is the army of Laketown allied with Thorin's company, played by Feedy. Now Feedy's gone with the Master of Laketown, Bard the Bowman, Alfred the Counselor, and Braga, Captain of the Guard, and all of them have very full warbands of Laketown Guard. He's also got Sigrid and Tilda in with Bard's warband, and his ally of the Thorin's company is Bilbo Baggins with the One Ring. This comes in at 56 models, and there's a lot to talk about in this list. Firstly, the inclusion of Sigrid and Tilda. Now Sigrid and Tilda are Bard's 2 daughters, and in game they are almost entirely useless except for the buffs that they give to Bard. They come in with Fight 1 and Strength 2, so not particularly impressive. But they give Bard +1 fight value and free heroic combats if they're within 6 inches of him. The caveat is, if they are killed by the enemy, then Bard must do everything in his power to get to that enemy model and kill them in return. This means that they're a big liability. Sure, they make Bard stronger, but if they can get sniped out by an enemy archer, it means that Bard can basically be wiped out for the game because he's just chasing some random Orc archer around the battlefield. I think one of the big things with Laketown is that it has a lot of give and take. It has some units that are very powerful, but they have a drawback. If you're a good player, you can work around the drawback and just get that power, which is why I think it performs so well. Now, another interesting thing to talk about here is Braga, Captain of the Guard. Braga, again, so powerful. He has 3 points of might, and each time he spends 1 on a 4-up, it's for free, just for his heroic actions. But he can't be affected by Bard's heroic actions. So there's a little bit of a give and take there. You need to play him tactically. You can't just throw your whole line together and think that everything's going to be okay, because Braga and Bard don't interact well with each other. Now, I would have loved to see how he played with Alfred the Counselor. Alfred the Counselor can give one of the friendly heroes up to 3 points of might. And honestly, Bard, the Master, and Braga are all good choices to give extra might to. So the Master can use the point of might to turn into a 12-inch banner that gives all of the Laketown Guard fight 4. That's absolutely incredible. Bard can use the points of might to do his regular Bard stuff, just be better at fighting, killing stuff, heroic combats, although he might not need that, so let's say heroic strikes. And then Braga, because he can get that might back, really for every 1 point of might you give Braga, it's kind of like giving 1.5 points of might out. So if Braga gets all 6, starts with 3, if Alfred gives them all 3, there's 6 points of might, 50% of those on average come back, so that's 9 points of might. But then 50% of the extra 3 that he got back should come back again, so that's another 1.5. So really, you can turn Braga into almost like a 10 might character, which is a lot of might. Very powerful. Let's jump into the next list, which is 8th place, played by JB, is Halls of Thranduil. He's got Thranduil in heavy armor with an additional sword in the Circuit of Kings. Importantly, he is on foot. And he's also got Legolas. And then he's got a variety of Mirkwood elves with a big variety of equipment. He's really using the whole page with all these different combinations he has there. He's only got 1 Wood Elf Sentinel and 3 Palace Guard. So it's an interesting Halls of Thranduil list. It comes in at 32 models. If I was building Halls of Thranduil, I would want more Palace Guard and I would definitely want another Sentinel. But that would drop the numbers down, so I'm sure that's where he was tossing up. Does he want more utility and more strength or more numbers? And look, ending up with 32 models is pretty good when everyone's Fight 5, you've got a bit of Fight 6 in there, and then Thranduil's rocking around with Fight 7. Legolas on horse is always a good inclusion because he's so good at shooting and sniping out important characters, horses and equipment, and just important characters as well. I really like the inclusion of the 1 Mirkwood Cavalry. It gives him 2 mounted units that he can send just to go and tag objectives. In scenarios like destroy the supplies, capture and control, those units are absolutely invaluable, so it's a good inclusion to have them. Alright, let's jump into 7th place, which is Survives of Lake Town, played by Thomas. Now this is Bard the Bowman on horse with Sigrid and Tilda again, and Alfred the Councillor and some Lake Town Militia. Then there's a Lake Town Militia Captain with more Lake Town Militia, and Gandalf the Grey with more Lake Town Militia. So everything that I said about Sigrid and Tilda in the previous army list applies to this one, but even a little bit stronger, because in this army list, Bard counts as a 12-inch banner as well. So you really don't want him chasing one random orc archer around the battlefield, because he's so important to keeping your army together and around. Now the next important thing here is that he's gone with a Lake Town Militia Captain. This is a choice that I'm not sure I fully agree with or understand. He could have taken Percy instead, who comes in at a similar cost but has an extra point of might and can boost up the archers, which I think is really valuable. What I think he probably did was take that captain so that he would have access to Heroic March in his army, which can help him move around a little bit faster. There's a lot of people who say that every single army list they build, they always include March. I'm not one of those people. I actually don't think it's very powerful and definitely not worth compromising the army list for. So I would have chose Percy. But once again, I'm sitting here criticizing one of the best players in the world, so take my criticism with a grain of salt. Another really interesting inclusion here is Gandalf the Grey. Now Gandalf the Grey is a part of the army list native, so it's not like he has to ally in or anything. And for 170 points, look, I struggle when I've played him before to get a lot of value out of Gandalf the Grey, but I think he does provide some really important things to this list. Firstly, he can help shut down other enemy heroes, and he can provide you with blinding light so you're not going to get shot too much. There's 44 models in this army, so on the higher side, but not as high as some of the other ones. Not as high as the Army of Lake Town that came in at 56, but much higher than the Halls of Thranduil at 32. In 6th place, we have Iron Hills, played by the Stone Master, and this is the lowest model count army of the top 10 with 28 models. So that's actually still like a medium amount of models. It's not like it's absolutely nothing. It's definitely on the lower side, but it's not exactly a low model count army. Now he's got Dane Ironfoot on foot, no boar here. Usually people always mount their Dane. They put him on the rocket sausage, as people like to call it, his boar, and it makes him a lot more lethal. But Stonemaster didn't see the need to do that. He's also got Murin and Dra and an Iron Hills Ballista, and then as many Iron Hill troops as he can fit. And there's no cavalry in here at all, so that means this army's really slow. With only 5-inch move on the dwarfs and no cavalry, I'm really surprised that he was able to come 6th using it. In all of my armies, I try to include at least a little bit of cavalry where possible. For example, in my army that I'm building for the Australian Masters competition, I've got 3 models on horse, just so that I can go around and tag objectives if I really need to. Now, the Iron Hill Ballista is a huge inclusion here. Personally, I absolutely hate going up against these things. They're so powerful, and they would have meant that this Iron Hills army is the strongest shooting army in the game pretty much. They outshoot just about everything if they have that Ballista. And he's got, a decent amount of these solid troops. I like Murin and Dra. They come in with 3 might each, and they have to come together. So it puts him at 9 might in total, or 10 might because of the Iron Hills Siege Veteran, and then Dane gets a 4-up Master of Battle. So that's pretty decent. In 5th place, we have Goblin Town, played by Devon. Now we went from the smallest army in the top 10 to the biggest army in the top 10, coming in with 82 goblins. It's a Goblin King with Golem, Grinner, Goblin Captain, Goblin Scribe, and 1 Goblin Mercenary Captain, with a bunch of bodies. A lot of Goblin Town lists are relatively similar, but I find the difference is how many mercenary captains there are and how big their warbands are. I think at 650, Devon definitely made the right choice just to go for 1 mercenary captain with 6 Goblin mercenaries. These guys basically have an ability where from turn 2 onwards, they can deploy in a terrain piece on the battlefield, so it's like they were waiting there in ambush. If you have a warband that's too big, it's often difficult to find them eligible pieces of terrain for them to deploy in. So by keeping it small, he kept his options open. Now Goblin Town has some pretty clear strengths. It's got super high numbers, generally decently high might, and it has the ability for models to enter the board in unconventional ways. So the Scribe can summon goblins from board edges, and as I said, the Mercenaries can deploy in some of the terrain pieces. But the weaknesses are incredibly low defense, low fight value, and low courage. So if you can break them, they start to flee straight away. I've played a lot of Goblin Town. I've actually won a tournament with my Goblin Town before, so I see how it came up in 5th. But I do think that it's one of those armies that really, really helps if you get the right scenarios. For example, if you're playing Lords of Battle, where you get a point for each model that you kill, you're in a lot of trouble with Goblin Town. Whereas if you get something like Domination, you're going to do okay because you've got so many models to cover those objectives. Now 4th place, just missing out on the podium, is Vise playing Survivors of Lake Town allied with Halls of Thranduil. This is coming in with 44 models. We've got Bard the Bowman with another Sigrid and Tilda. That's 3 in the top 10. Alfred again, a Lake Town Militia Captain, Bane Son of Bard, and Tariel. Now I feel like I'll be a little bit of a broken record here. Man, Sigrid and Tilda is such a liability. Again, I would have gone for Percy over the Lake Town Militia Captain. And Bane is a really interesting inclusion. He ties in with Sigrid and Tilda. He gets +1 fight and a free heroic combat from them, but he does only have 1 attack, so you got to pair him up with some other stuff. Now the big point of difference in this list is the Tariel component. We've got Tariel and some Mirkwood Elves. Now personally, if I was going to be taking that warband, all of those Mirkwood Elves would have had glaives, and they would have just sat behind some of the Lake Town Militia and provided fight 5. She does bring 1 Wood Elf Sentinel along, which is one of the more powerful units in the game, and Tariel herself is a beast. She starts with 3 attacks, and she has the Blade Mistress special rule that allows her to get more attacks if she's fighting more enemies. It also really helps that this list has the 1 cavalry model. As I said before, I like just having a few cavalry models around. And 44 models is decently large, but not as big as some of the other ones. Let's jump into 3rd place, and this is again on the smaller side. It's a Numenor and Rivendell alliance, so sort of the last alliance, but not quite. We've got Isildur with a shield and the 1 ring on horse. So Elendil's already been slain, Sauron's been slain, and they're just hanging out sometime after the battle. We've also got Eristor and Círdan. And they have relatively expected warbands. All of those high elves are taking spears because they want to be sitting behind the Numenorians so that they can provide that higher fight. Let's start by talking about Isildur. Isildur is an absolute beast of a character. So he starts with fight 6, 3 attacks, strength 5. He's also on a horse, so that's 4 attacks on the charge, so very, very powerful there. The important thing he has is the 1 ring. When he wears the 1 ring, any model that he's fighting against has their fight value halved. Because Isildur is fight 6, even if that model is fight 10, he's always going to be higher fight than it. But it's not all good when it comes to the 1 ring. At the start of each turn, he has to roll a dice. On the roll of a 1 or 2, the power of the ring has taken him, and his opponent is able to move him. That's really, really bad because they're just going to send Isildur 6 inches away from themselves. That means that there's 1 turn of Isildur walking the wrong direction, and the next turn, if he walks the right direction, he ends up exactly where he was a little while ago. So it's really, really bad when that happens. Because of that, you only want to use the 1 ring in the most dire of situations where otherwise he'll probably die, or you're trying to snipe a big character hero from the enemy. He's also got Eristor, who's similar to a High Elf Captain, but just better in my opinion. He gets reroll all failed wounds and has throwing daggers. And then the other big one is Círdan. Círdan's the ultimate support character. He can give all of the models around him terror, all of the models around him fearless, and the Enchanted Blade's magical power, which when he casts, it allows a model to reroll failed wounds. So if you cast that on Isildur, and he's wearing the 1 ring, he can put out a lot of damage very quickly. I'm really happy a list like this came in 3rd place, because it's very unconventional and not something that I've seen much of. Alright, let's get into 2nd place, and that is Corsairs of Umbar and the Serpent Horde, 44 models again, played by Princess Jasmine. We've got Dalamir with some Arbalesters and a bunch of warriors, Suladan with a bunch of warriors and a couple riders, and Raza with a bunch of warriors and another serpent rider. Dalamir is the leader of this army, and I think that's a really, really interesting point. Both Dalamir and Suladan are heroes of legend, so either of them could have been chosen to be the leader. Suladan has defense 5, 3 wounds, and just 1 fate, so he's pretty easy to kill. But Dalamir has 2 wounds, defense 4, and 3 fate. Also, very easy to kill. Suladan is a 6-inch banner, so when the enemy has a 6-inch banner, everyone wants to kill it. And I think that's why Princess Jasmine chose to go with Dalamir as the leader, because she knew that everyone already wanted to kill Suladan, so why would we give them an extra reason to want him dead? This way, if they target Suladan, they kill your 6-inch banner, at least they haven't gotten victory points for killing the leader. This army has a ton of ranged threat. The Servant Horde component has 50% bows, and the Corsairs have crossbows, which are so powerful. It has a lot of models, it has some speed to it, it has Raza, who I'm a big fan of. A lot of people say leave him at home, but this proves that Raza is absolutely awesome. So, congratulations on coming second place, Princess Jasmine. It's time to get into the winner of Ardacon, the world champion of 2023, and that is Rawdog, playing Arnor. Yes, you heard that right. Playing Arnor. Now, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that Arnor is this amazingly strong faction. Everyone says like, oh, Dragon Emperor, Sultan Lothlorien, Azog, they're all too good. No one ever complains about Arnor. No one ever really talks about Arnor. It's quite a rare faction to collect. The models are out of production and they have been for quite a while. And you've got Arvidui, Malbeth, captains, warriors, and rangers. So really not many options. But Rawdog proved that you don't need many options. You can win with Arnor anyway. I definitely would have rated it as like a maybe mid to bottom tier faction. So to see it win Ardacon is absolutely awesome, and it just goes to show that this game will always surprise you. So why is this army good? Let's talk about where its weaknesses are first. And that's really in the heroes. We've got Arvidui is the biggest hero. He's only 80 points. He's 2 attacks, fight 5, 3 points of might, only 1 fate, 2 wounds. So overall, he's not going to go in one turn and do a ton of damage. Most of the army is courage 2 as well. And there's no speed, there's no cavalry in there at all. But let's have a look at the strengths. The first one is 48 models that are defense 6 and fight 4. That's a great start. We've got 15 bows, which is again pretty good. And we've got Malbeth the Seer. Malbeth provides a 5-up fate save to all models around him. I think it's within 6 inches of him. If they take a wound on a 5-up, it's ignored. When you have a lot of models, you need to kill 25 models to break this army. So if you deal 25 wounds, 1/3 of those will be saved by Malbeth. So really, if you want to break this army, you need to do 35 to 40 wounds to consistently get the job done, which makes it a lot more survivable. And Arvidui gives all models within 6 inches of him the Fearless special rule, automatically pass their courage tests. So it's really, really important that he stays alive to get around the courage 2 of Arnor. There's a couple of things I want to point out in this list that I really like. The first one is that one of the warriors of Arnor was weapon swapped to have a flail. I don't think that's a tactical choice. I think it's more of a funny choice because I can't think of a situation where it's actually helpful, but it's great that he did that. And the next one is the single Hobbit archer included in this army list. The Hobbit archers are in the Arnor army, and I think it's hilarious that he managed to sneak just one of them in there. I hope that he was like a little main character running around, and whenever he did anything, it was so exciting, because why would a 5-point Hobbit matter in a battle of huge monsters and enemy heroes? Before we sign off, I want to quickly talk about these top 10 tournament army lists. The first observation is that all of them in general were relatively high model count. There's a couple outliers, but most of them were in the 40s to 50s. So I think that goes to show that the meta at the moment is taking more models on the table. And the other thing that I think is really, really important to have a look at with this is that a lot of the armies that are kind of the hot topic didn't make it into the top 10. There was no Dragon Emperor and there was no Assault on Lothlorien. So just because people are saying that these army lists are so good and too powerful and all that, doesn't actually mean anything. When it comes to it, it comes down to the player's skill, and if the most skilled players don't bring those army lists, well, they're not going to turn up in the top 10. Congratulations to everyone who was playing in Ardacon. I can't wait to join you over there one day, but until then, I'll just break down your army lists from afar. This has been Conquest Creations. Thank you for watching.